Welcome back to another episode of Projecting Grandeur. I'm your host, Ron Dichter. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being part of this community. The taping of this show is December 1st. I know that it will get released a little bit later, but the reason I wanted to give the date here is I wanted to have a little bit of reflection as we get to the last month of 2025 and kind of talking about, really what I've learned, what I can pass on, and maybe some of the, I don't want to call them cautionary tales, but some of the, we'll call it wisdom as I get older here that I can pass on. But I was thinking back to my early days, and I know I've told this story before, but there was a point in my life where I was running a, decent sized company. It was still small at the time, but I probably had at the moment 30, maybe 40 employees, and I was still living in a shed. And I don't think people fully understand, that I really did have nothing and lost everything. And, when I built back my first company that I ended up selling for 8 figures, um, I literally started that business in a shed. I was living, behind my friend's house. He was gracious enough that he had a equivalent of a tough shed. It wasn't a tough shed, but it kind of looked like that. That was insulated and didn't have heat or air. So I brought in a little rolling plug-in furnace and a window air conditioner for the summer when it got hot. But when I finally moved out of that shed, I think the business had 3 offices. We had, call it 35-ish, maybe 40 employees. And I finally got to the point where I was going to start paying myself from this business. And this was 2, 3 years in the making. And so as I think about, I don't know, somewhere in the second, maybe early third year, when I finally decided that I was going to take a paycheck, that meant that I probably needed to move out of this shed that I had started in. But, as you think about your 2026 goals and you think about the things that you're wanting to accomplish, you need to be honest with yourself about where you're at in your life. You need to be honest with yourself about what pain or sacrifice that you might have to go through, in order to achieve some of the goals that you want. And you have to ask yourself, am I really willing to do this? Because it's hard. And not everybody has to go to that level of struggle, that I went through. And there's a lot of people that have done way more struggle than that. But there is going to be some struggle, right? There are going to be some sacrifices. There are going to be some decisions that you make that are going to, make things tough. And you really need to understand what it is that you're getting yourself into and make sure that it's something that you're ready and willing to do. And I know that there's two schools of thoughts about creating, whether it be New Year's resolutions or time-based plans, but I personally like them. I think that they give me a chance to reset, not necessarily just the first of the year, but the first of anything. And since this is December 1st, and I usually use December to really reflect upon the year and really begin to make some, big, sometimes audacious goals for the next year, I want to use this time to my advantage. And so as I started thinking about it last night, as we were, ending November and going into December, I was like, well, what can I share today that can be meaningful for, especially those of you that are looking to have big changes in 2026? And, really what I would just urge everyone to do is this is not about showing everybody, the journey. That's a you thing. And sometimes we get so hung up, especially with social media, that we have to kind of show our work along the way. And you're not doing this for them. You're doing this for you. And, my days living in the shed, I never told anyone I lived in the shed. Nobody knew, other than maybe my two closest, colleagues at the business at the time actually knew I lived in a shed, but I wasn't broadcasting that like a look at me, I came from a shed and built this company. Like that's just the reality that I lived in. And so as I think about, what choices I'm going to make as I go into 2026 and what sacrifices, I'm going to have to make, obviously at this point, I'm not necessarily making those level of sacrifices, but I'm making time sacrifices. I'm making dollar sacrifices. I'm making opportunity cost sacrifices just like anyone else. And so as you think about your planning for the next year, you think about what it is that you want to accomplish, my advice to you is don't worry about where you are today. Project that grandeur of where you're going. Be focused on what that destination is going to look like. Be conscious of the journey, but you don't have to tell everybody about the journey. That's a you thing. So put your head down, go to work, make big goals. Don't be afraid to take risks. And remember, you will struggle. You will go through pain. That's part of the process. Everyone's level of pain will vary, but you will have it. So embrace it, enjoy it, and know that you'll have a story that you can look back, just like I'm sitting here today, to tell that story to other future entrepreneurs so they can be successful in their journey. Go make 2026 amazing. Use December to plan so that you can get out the gate next year strong. This is Projecting Grandeur. I'm Ron Dichter. We help entrepreneurs change the world. These are the people that are thinking, innovating, and creating in a way that nobody else is. And so anything I can do to help entrepreneurs, I'm all about that. So let's go out there, change the world. Have a good day.